My name is Emily Hartley. I'm 29 years old. And on a gray Tuesday morning in November, I sat in a leather chair across from a man I had only met once before. And I watched my Aunt Linda hear the truth about herself for the very first time in her life. She had walked into that office confident. She had worn her good blazer, the charcoal one she saves for occasions she considers important. She had Madison beside her, phone already out, scrolling through what I would later learn were contractor profiles. She had two of my aunts in the back row who had driven 40 minutes because they thought this was a formality. A rubber stamp. A confirmation of something already decided. What none of them knew was that my grandmother Dorothy had spent the last 3 months of her life doing something extraordinary, quietly, deliberately, and completely alone. She had assembled the truth about what had happened inside our family for years, who had shown up and who had performed showing up, and she had handed that truth to a lawyer 2 towns over on a Tuesday afternoon in September, arriving by taxi with a manila folder she had been filling for months. I didn't know any of that when she died. I found out 11 days after her funeral, in the most Dorothy way imaginable. She left me a clue inside a quilt. This is that story. Dorothy Elaine Hartley turned 80 years old on a Saturday in March 4 years ago. She was small by then, smaller than I remembered her being when I was a child, and she wore the lavender dress she had been saving for a special occasion and earrings that had belonged to her own mother. The party was held in the church hall 3 blocks from her house. There were balloons. There was a sheet cake from the grocery store. There were 63 people who came because Dorothy had, over the course of her life, been the kind of woman people genuinely wanted to celebrate. My Aunt Linda gave a speech. It lasted 15 minutes. I know because I timed it on my phone, not out of cruelty, but because I was standing near the kitchen doorway, holding a stack of paper plates, and I had nothing else to do with my hands. Linda talked about what it meant to be a devoted daughter-in-law. She talked about sacrifice and family and the deep bond she had formed with Dorothy over 28 years of marriage into our family. She cried twice. Both times were precisely timed to moments when the room was very quiet. She ended with a quote she attributed to Dorothy, but that I recognized from a greeting card company's Instagram page, and she received a standing ovation from the aunts in the front row. I sat in the back and cut the cake. That was the pattern. That had always been the pattern. Linda arrived for Christmas and Easter with a casserole and a camera. She documented everything. She hashtagged things. She curated a version of family devotion so consistently and so publicly that the people on the edges of our family, the ones who only saw the highlights, believed every word of it. And in that version of the story, she was the hero. She was the devoted one. She was the daughter Dorothy never had. What the camera missed was Tuesday. Every Tuesday for 14 months, when I drove Dorothy to chemotherapy at the oncology center on Route 9 and sat in the waiting room for 2.5 hours with a crossword puzzle and a coffee, and then drove her home, and then stayed to make sure she could get herself to the bathroom without falling. What the camera missed was Saturday mornings when I pulled into Dorothy's driveway at 9:15 with 2 bags from the grocery store and reorganized her refrigerator and checked her pill organizer, and sat with her at the kitchen table while she told me stories about her own mother, who had been a seamstress and a stubborn woman, which she considered to be the same thing. What the camera missed was the night in February, 14 months before she died, when Dorothy called me at 11:50 at night and said very quietly that the pain was bad and she didn't want to wake anyone. I was at her house in 19 minutes. I sat in the armchair next to her bed until 4 in the morning. She slept. I did not. When she woke up, she looked at me with an expression I have never been able to fully describe, something between gratitude and grief, and she said, "I know what you do, Emily. I see every single thing you do." I told her I didn't do it to be seen. She said she knew that. She said that was exactly the point. My Aunt Linda has never worked a full-time job. She ran a candle business on Etsy that made $2,400 in its best year. She has been married to my Uncle Robert, Dorothy's son, for 28 years, and in that time she built her identity entirely around what the family reflected back at her. She needed to be the devoted one. She needed to be the generous one. She needed, most of all, to be the one Dorothy loved best. Madison is Linda's daughter and my cousin. She's 27 years old, and she is, by every external metric, the success story of our family. She sells real estate. She leases a white Range Rover she absolutely cannot afford. I know this because I am a paralegal and I have a passing familiarity with what real estate agents at her level of production actually earn. And it is not white Range Rover money. She has 40,000 followers on Instagram. She posts every day, brunches, sunsets, grateful heart captions, written with the careful effort of someone who needs you to believe the gratitude is effortless. She visited Dorothy twice in the 3 years before she died. Both times were on holidays when the entire family was present. Both times were documented. I work at a small law firm in the town where I grew up. My job title is paralegal. In our family, this is considered a placeholder, a thing you do while you figure out what you actually want to be. No one has ever asked me a follow-up question about my job. No one has ever asked what kind of law the firm practices or what my actual responsibilities are. The assumption is that I am unremarkable. And that assumption has been so consistent and so thorough that it became, over the years, a kind of invisibility. I moved through family gatherings like furniture. I was pleasant and helpful and forgettable, and I handed people plates and refilled glasses and drove home alone. What no one in my family knew is that you learn things, being a paralegal. You learn what documents are legally enforceable and which ones are not. You learn what a properly executed will looks like. You learn the difference between a witness signature and a scrawled one. You learn the names of estate attorneys in the area, because estate attorneys and family law firms have a way of knowing each other. None of that knowledge saved Dorothy, but it saved me, eventually, because when the moment came, I knew exactly what I was looking at. Dorothy died on a Thursday morning in October at 6:47. She died at home, in her own bed, which was what she had wanted. I had been there the night before. I left at 11:15 when her breathing had steadied and she had fallen asleep. I have thought many times about whether I should have stayed. I have made my peace with that question, mostly. The hospice nurse told me later that Dorothy had been peaceful, that she had not been afraid. 2 days after the funeral, Linda called a family gathering. 8 people around Dorothy's dining room table, in Dorothy's dining room, with Dorothy's things still on the shelves and Dorothy's handwriting still on the grocery list pad stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a pineapple. Linda sat at the head of the table. She had printed something, a single page, folded once. She smoothed it with her palm before she began to speak. "I know this is hard for all of us," she said, "but I think Mom would have wanted us to handle this like a family. She was always so clear about what she wanted. We all knew it." She read from the document. The house. Dorothy's house at 14 Clover Hill Road. The one she had lived in for 31 years. The one with the kitchen window that looks out over the back garden she planted herself. The one she bought with Dorothy's late husband before Robert and Linda's youngest was even born. The house, valued at $380,000, to Madison. Dorothy's savings account, $94,000, to Madison. All personal property to Madison. She slid a piece of paper across the table toward me. "She left you her quilt, sweetheart. The blue one you always liked. She knew you'd appreciate something sentimental." I looked at the piece of paper. It was not a will. It was not even close to a will. It was something Linda had typed herself, formatted to look official, printed on paper that was trying to imply authority it did not have. I picked up the paper. I read it. I set it down. I did not say a word. Madison was already pulling out her phone. She walked to the window and photographed the living room. She tilted her head at the wallpaper, a soft floral pattern Dorothy had chosen in 1994 and always loved. "I'm thinking we take down that wallpaper first. It's giving very 1987. The bones are good, though. It'll photograph well for the listing." She caught herself. She looked around the room. "I mean, after we settle in, of course?" No one said anything. 2 of the aunts nodded vaguely. My Uncle Robert looked at the table. I folded my hands in my lap and waited for the meeting to end. 1 week later, I was standing in the hallway outside Dorothy's kitchen when I heard Linda talking to a family friend in the living room. Her voice was carrying the particular quality of someone who wants to be overheard. Dorothy always knew Madison was the one with real potential, she said. Emily is sweet, but she's never really had ambition. Some people are just meant for quieter lives. I stood very still in the hallway. I counted to 8. Then I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water and looked out Dorothy's kitchen window at the back garden, which had gone to seed in the way gardens do when the person who loves them is no longer there to tend them. I went home that evening and sat for a long time in my car in my own driveway before going inside. I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I sat with the knowledge that I had watched, quietly and without protest, the full machinery of my family's favoritism arrive at its logical conclusion, and I felt something settle inside me. Not resignation, but clarity. The kind of clarity you feel when something you have always suspected is finally confirmed out loud. 2 days later, I went to Dorothy's house to collect the quilt. It was folded on Dorothy's bed, the blue and white one she had made herself over the course of several winters, using fabric she had been collecting since before I was born. I lifted it carefully. It was heavier than I expected. I pressed my face into it for a moment, the way you do when something smells like someone you've lost. Something slipped out from between the folds and fell to the floor. A business card, cream-colored. Simple font, Gerald Fitch, estate attorney. Fitch and Associates, an address on Maple Street in a town 22 miles away. On the back of the card, in Dorothy's handwriting, in the thin, careful script she used when she was writing something she wanted me to read clearly. Call him. Tell him who you are. I held the card for a long time. Then I put it in my pocket. Then I sat down on the edge of Dorothy's bed and I pressed both hands flat on the quilt, and I did something I hadn't allowed myself to do in 2 weeks. I cried. Alone in Dorothy's room, with no one watching. Not for long. But enough. Then I stopped. I wiped my face. I folded the quilt carefully, and I called Gerald Fitch the following Thursday evening at 7:12. He answered on the second ring. I told him my name. There was a pause that told me everything before he spoke. Miss Hartley, he said. I have been trying to reach your family since the morning after your grandmother's passing. I'm very glad you called. He told me to come in the next morning and to bring anyone I trusted. I came alone. If you're still watching, I want you to know something. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever sat in a room and watched someone confidently claim credit for something they had no right to? Because what happened next is the part of the story that Dorothy planned long before she needed to. Gerald Fitch's office was small and careful. The kind of office that belongs to a man who has spent his career making sure that what people intend to happen actually happens. He shook my hand. He offered me tea. He sat down across from me, and he opened a folder, and he told me what my grandmother had done. On a Tuesday afternoon in September, 3 months before she died, Dorothy Hartley had arrived at his office by taxi. She had called ahead. She had not told anyone in the family. She had carried a manila folder she had been assembling for months. Bank statements, the property deed to 14 Clover Hill Road, a list of dates and visits she had kept in a small notebook she stored by her bed, and a handwritten letter she had drafted and revised over the course of several weeks. Dorothy had told Gerald she needed to update her will. She told him she had reasons to believe the existing document, one drafted in 2019 that she had never formally executed, might be used by certain members of her family in ways she did not intend. She told him she wanted no ambiguity. She told him she wanted everything airtight. On September 14th, in Gerald Fitch's office on Maple Street, Dorothy Hartley signed a new will in front of 2 witnesses and a notary. Her physician, Dr. Chitt, Ann Carroll, was present and submitted a signed statement confirming Dorothy's full mental competency. Gerald Fitch himself signed as a witness. The house at 14 Clover Hill Road to Emily. The savings account of $94,000 to Emily. All personal property to Emily. Linda and Madison Hartley received nothing. Dorothy also left Gerald Fitch a sealed letter, 3 pages, handwritten. He was to read it aloud at the formal will reading, but only if Linda was in the room. I sat across from Gerald Fitch and I listened to all of this, and I did not speak until he had finished. Then I said, "She came by taxi?" "Every time," he said. "She was here 4 times in total. She was a very thorough woman." "She was," I said. Gerald had been calling the family since the day after Dorothy's death. Linda had intercepted his calls. His number appeared as an unfamiliar law office on caller ID, and had assumed he was a creditor. She had not called back. She had not told anyone in the family that a lawyer had been trying to reach them. She had gone ahead and held her own meeting with her own document and read it at Dorothy's dining room table in front of 8 people who had no reason to question her. Dorothy had anticipated this. The business card in the quilt was not an accident. Dorothy had placed it there deliberately, folded into the blue and white quilt she knew Emily would come to collect, because she knew that of all the people in the family, Emily was the one who would know what a business card from an estate attorney meant, and who would have the presence of mind and the professional knowledge to understand exactly what to do next. I spent the following 2.5 weeks preparing. I requested official copies of every document from Gerald's office. I reviewed the new will carefully. I cross-referenced the date of execution against anything that could be challenged. I looked at the 2019 draft Linda had used, the document she had printed and brought to that table, and I compared it to the September will, and the gap between them was not even close. One was a rough draft that Dorothy had never signed or witnessed. The other was a properly executed legal document, certified by a physician, and witnessed by 2 adults and a notary. I also sat with the fact of what Dorothy had done. She hadn't told me. She hadn't hinted. She hadn't asked my opinion or warned me what was coming. She had simply gone, alone, 2 towns over, on a Tuesday afternoon, and she had done what needed to be done. She had assembled the evidence herself, the notebook by her bed with every date and every visit, her own handwriting, her own words. And she had handed it to a lawyer she chose herself because she trusted him to do his job after she was gone. I thought about Linda standing at the head of that dining room table, smoothing her printed page with her palm. I thought about Madison photographing the living room, already talking about listings. I thought about being handed a quilt and told to feel honored because it was sentimental. I did feel honored, just not for the reason anyone assumed. In the last week of October, Gerald sent a certified letter to Linda Hartley, formally requesting that all interested parties attend an official will reading at Fitch & Associates on November 4th. At 10 in the morning. The letter was formal. It cited the estate. It did not indicate what would be discussed. Linda called me the evening after she received it. She sounded slightly put out by the inconvenience, but not worried. "I don't know why there's a whole formal reading," she said. "I already handled everything with the family, but I suppose we should go to be respectful. You'll come, won't you? It shouldn't take long." "I'll be there," I said. "Good. Madison is coming too. We can all get lunch after." "That sounds nice," I said. She hung up. I set my phone face down on my kitchen table and looked out the window at nothing in particular for a while. November 4th arrived with the particular gray stillness of early winter mornings in this part of the country. The sky low and flat, the trees finished with their leaves, the light thin and honest. Gerald Fitch's office was on the 2nd floor of a building on Maple Street, above an insurance company and a tax preparer. There was a small conference room with a rectangular table and 6 chairs and a window that looked out over a parking lot. I arrived at 9:50. Gerald was already there. He looked at me when I walked in, and he gave me a single, measured nod. I sat down on the right side of the table. Linda arrived at 10:03 with Madison beside her and 2 of the family aunts, Patricia and Ruth, trailing behind them. Madison was already on her phone. Linda wore the charcoal blazer. She sat down across from me without making real eye contact, which is what she does when she is treating something as a formality. Gerald Fitch opened the meeting precisely. He thanked everyone for coming. He explained that he had been retained by Dorothy Elaine Hartley in September to execute her estate. He explained the estate included the property at 14 Clover Hill Road, a savings account, and all associated personal property. He explained that he had become aware that certain family members had been operating under the assumption that a prior document constituted Dorothy's will. Linda straightened slightly. "I have Dorothy's will," she said. "I shared it with the family weeks ago." "What you shared," Gerald said, "was an unexecuted draft from 2019. It was never signed, never witnessed, and never notarized. Under state law, it has no legal standing." Linda's face went very still. "What do you mean it has no legal standing? It means it is not a will," Gerald said, not unkindly. "Dorothy executed a legally binding will on September 14th of this year. That document supersedes any prior draft." Madison looked up from her phone for the first time. Gerald opened his folder. He read the will. "The house at 14 Clover Hill Road to Emily Hartley. The savings account, $94,000. To Emily Hartley. All personal property to Emily Hartley." The room was quiet for a moment. "That's not right," Madison said. Her voice had a strange quality, like something being held too tightly. "Grandma would never, she would never have left everything to. That's not what she—" "Madison," Gerald said, quietly and firmly. She stopped. He reached into his folder and withdrew a sealed envelope. It had been sealed with tape and then initialed across the seal in Dorothy's handwriting. "Dorothy also left a letter," Gerald said. "She gave me specific instructions. I am to read it aloud at the will reading, but only if her daughter-in-law, Linda Hartley, is present in the room." He looked across the table. "Mrs. Hartley, are you Linda Hartley?" Linda's voice was barely audible. "Yes." He broke the seal carefully. He removed 3 pages, handwritten on the cream-colored notepaper Dorothy kept in the drawer of her writing desk. He adjusted his reading glasses, and he read. Dorothy's letter was written in the voice that anyone who had ever spent real time with her would recognize immediately, the exact particular voice of a woman who chose her words with care and meant every single one of them. She wrote about what she had observed over the years. She wrote about who came on the Tuesdays that no one was watching and who did not. She listed dates, the specific dates from the small notebook she had kept beside her bed. Every Tuesday at the oncology center, every Saturday morning at her kitchen table. Every night someone had sat with her in the dark when the pain was bad. She had kept the notebook for 14 months. She had written down every visit, every phone call, every errand run quietly and without an audience. She wrote about Linda. She was direct, but not cruel. She wrote that she understood that Linda had loved the idea of being devoted more than she had loved the practice of it. She wrote that she was not angry. She wrote that she hoped Linda would understand one day the difference between performing a life and living one. She wrote about Madison. She said Madison was talented and young and had time to learn things that are hard to learn. She said she wished her well. Then she wrote about Emily. And this is the part where the room went completely silent. She described the night in February when Emily had arrived in 19 minutes. She described Emily sitting in the armchair until 4 in the morning. She described the crossword puzzles in the waiting room at the oncology center. She described the sound of Emily's car pulling into the driveway on Saturday mornings, the way she always recognized it. She wrote that she had watched Emily refill her medications and pay her utility bills and organize her pantry and sit with her while she told stories about her own mother, and that Emily had never once asked for anything in return or mentioned any of it to anyone. She wrote that this was the rarest kind of love, the kind that does not need to be witnessed to be real. She wrote, "I could not let it go unrewarded. Not because Emily needed the money or the house, but because I needed, before I left, to make sure that the truth was spoken out loud in a room where people who had dismissed her would have to sit and hear it." She wrote, "This is my last act of love, and I am at peace with it." Gerald finished reading. He folded the 3 pages with the same careful deliberateness with which Dorothy had written them. He set them on the table. The conference room on the 2nd floor of the building on Maple Street was absolutely silent. Madison's phone was face down on the table. Linda was staring at her hands, both of them flat on the table in front of her, and I noticed that they were trembling slightly. Patricia and Ruth in the back row had not moved. I sat with my hands folded in my lap. Gerald closed the folder. "The estate will be transferred to Emily Hartley within 30 days, he said. "If any party wishes to contest this will, they are entitled to do so. However, I should inform you that Dorothy Hartley also submitted a signed and notarized statement of mental competency, witnessed by her physician, Dr. Rissishin, Anne Carroll, and by myself, on September 14th. The document is airtight." He paused. That concludes the reading. Thank you all for coming. No one spoke. Madison picked up her phone and held it without looking at it. Linda gathered her bag from the floor and stood and moved toward the door with the careful, deliberate movements of someone who needs to reach an exit before they allow themselves to feel anything. Patricia and Ruth followed her silently. At the door, Linda stopped. She did not turn around. She said to the wall in front of her, "Emily, I hope you know that I—" And then she stopped. Whatever the rest of the sentence was going to be, she seemed to decide it was not something she was able to say. She walked out. The room was very quiet. Gerald looked at me. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said. "She was a remarkable woman." "Yes," I said, "she was." In the weeks after the reading, Linda called me 4 times. The first call, I let go to voicemail. She said she hoped there were no hard feelings and that she had genuinely believed the document she'd shared with the family was Dorothy's actual will. She said Dorothy had always been private about certain things and that none of them could have known. She said she hoped we could move forward. The second call I answered. She said she was going through a difficult financial time and that she had been counting on certain things that she now understood had been a misunderstanding. I told her I understood. I told her I was sorry she was going through a difficult time. I did not offer anything else because nothing was being asked of me that was mine to give. The third call, I let go to voicemail. It was longer. She said she felt that Emily must understand that she had genuinely loved Dorothy and that whatever the letter had said, it was complicated. And families are always more complicated than a letter can capture, and she hoped Emily would have some grace. I thought about that word. Grace. I thought about how often people ask for grace after a reckoning, as though grace means pretending the reckoning never happened. The fourth call I did not answer, and I did not listen to the voicemail for 3 days. When I finally listened to it, she said, very quietly, that she supposed she understood, that she was sorry, that she had not been who she thought she was, and that was something she was going to have to live with. I listened to that message twice. Then I deleted it. Madison sent me a text message 1 month after the reading. It said, "I've been thinking about what Grandma wrote. I didn't know you did all that. I'm sorry I didn't know." That one I kept. I moved into Dorothy's house in December. I replaced nothing. I kept the kitchen window with the view of the back garden. I kept the grocery list pad with the pineapple magnet. I kept Dorothy's small notebook from the bedside table, the one she used to record every visit, every date, every errand I had ever run, and I put it in the drawer of her writing desk, where it will stay. On a Saturday morning in January, I went to the grocery store at 9:15 in the morning. I pulled into the driveway of my own house and sat for a moment with the bags in the back seat and the engine off. The garden was asleep under a thin frost. The kitchen light was on inside. I thought about what Dorothy had said to me in this house, in the armchair next to her bed at 4 in the morning, almost 2 years before she died. "I know what you do, Emily. I see every single thing you do." I had told her I didn't do it to be seen. She had said she knew that. She had said that was exactly the point. What I understand now, sitting in the driveway of the house she left me, is that being seen is not the same as needing to be seen. For years, I had confused the two. I thought because I didn't need the recognition, I didn't deserve it. I thought my willingness to go unnoticed was the same as consenting to be invisible. It was not. Dorothy did not leave me a house. She left me proof that someone saw me. After a lifetime of being the person in the back row cutting the cake, that proof, 3 handwritten pages read aloud in a room full of people who had looked past me for years, was worth more than any inheritance I could name. The truth has a way of keeping its own schedule. It does not always arrive when you are ready for it or when you need it most. Sometimes it waits, quiet and patient, folded inside a blue quilt on a bed in a house that smells like someone you love, waiting for you to reach for something sentimental and find, tucked inside it, a business card with 4 words on the back. Call him. Tell him who you are. My grandmother knew who I was. She always had. She just made sure that eventually everyone else would know it too. If you have ever quietly shown up for someone, driven them somewhere, stayed through a long night, carried the thing no one saw you carrying, while someone else took the credit, I want to hear from you. Tell me in the comments below because I read every single one. And if this story made you feel something, please subscribe because these are the stories that don't get told nearly enough, and I intend to keep telling them. Have you ever quietly shown up for someone while others got the credit?